All right, everybody, there is new news hot off the press. You know it, I know it, everybody knows it. What's going on here is this is something that's coming to us straight from Wildcast with Ian Hazakasis. We have Dratnos and we have, what's his name? Max from Liquid. You know, he's the raid leader and shot caller. They're all content creators with the exception of Ian, who is the, director and everything. So we're going to get into this. Now, to be fair, I've watched a lot of videos on this, like 4 hours of everyone's takes. So this isn't going to be an original react, but I'm going to give you my own take on this because something that nobody's doing is talking about, wait for it.
Welcome to a special edition of Wowcast, where we're going to talk about a patch 11.1.7 feature, and then a broader discussion about add-ons in World of Warcraft in general.
Oh no.
I'm Dratnos, World of Warcraft content creator.
Where did I put my head?
I'm Max. I'm the raid leader of Team Liquid, the WoW Guild, and a content creator as well.
And I'm Ian Hazakostas, game director on WoW, and it's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Very excited to be
Hey,
here.
look, I'm right here in the
So
middle.
what are we doing in 11.1.7?
A whole bunch of fun stuff, but one of the features that we're extra excited about is a new UI option that we're adding called
Dratnos is very hairy. Very hairy. He's Greek, if I had to guess.
Rotation Assist, which is really designed to help players who are maybe picking up a new spec or want some guidance on what abilities they should be using when, without having to turn to third-party add-ons for it. So we've seen that, there's an add-on called Achilles that is very popular with a lot of players. We're basically building in a very similar version of that into the base UI that you can opt into. That will, no matter what DPS spec you're playing, highlight the recommended next ability given, your current energy.
So right now, I want you guys to raise your hands. I don't know if there's an emote for it, but who plays with He Killy? Who plays with He Killy that you know? Me. And I live by it religiously. You and everyone you know, right? Now, I've been using it. I know. I've been using it since I came to the game. I don't know what got me into it, but I started using it and I was like, you know what? I should probably go with this and send this to be something that can help me learn the classes. So I started as a hunter, went to demon hunter, and now I am pally. But I really feel that rotation helpers aren't horrible. Not horrible. Have a good night, Hazy.
What's going on around you, and so forth. One extra thing that we're also going to do, which maybe goes a bit beyond what the add-ons can do, is also have a one-button version of that, where there'll be like a keybind that if you just want almost an auto rotation, you can opt into that, and it will just automatically cast the next recommended ability in the sequence.
All right. So so if you've listened to what he just said, there are two aspects to this. One aspect is going to be an assist, kind of like He Killy. The next one is going to be a single button that you can hit that will go through your whole rotation. One thing that I have not seen in Ed, and maybe this is taboo, maybe this is something that I'm being the magician that's letting the trick be known to you all. This is available already. It's called GSE. And if you don't know what that is, GSE is exactly that. It's a macro that goes through all your abilities. Now, I've done it with my Demon Hunter. I did fucking amazing. I did it with my Monk. Not so good. You have to eliminate certain things out of the macro if you have Sky Reach, because that could put you in some bad shit. And then you have He Killy. Now with this, I've been able to attain this. I was waiting for this point. So I don't know how high of a level they're talking, quite honestly, because I feel like I'm unstoppable right now. I'm not, but I still suck. I still suck. And then I just try to do the best that I can. And the reason I say that is because, you know, if anybody watches my my stream here, you know, I'm still doing this kind of damage with these kind of interrupts using Heal Kelly. All right? I'm still doing this kind of damage. This was a 14. This was a 14 brew. And I still have, you know, I'm still comparable to everybody. So it really matters on like how you can gravitate to it. I truly believe that, you know, I have a hunter guilder that uses it and she can't get higher than gray parses in raid. Oh, you want to see my parses? Oh, wait for it. Let me see if I can bring that up for you. You want to see my parses? I recently had a professional parser look for them and tell me how I was doing. He might not like that I put his name on stream, but he's going to be trying to teach me how to read logs. All right. So, all right. I don't have an editor, but here it is. I'm basically hitting at 8. Oh, okay, here. I'm hitting at 89.4. 89.4. And this is a guy that recruits for mythic guilds. All right. So this is what I was looking at something else. And he's like, no, you're wrong. You got to go for damage parses. And what does he say? Not bad. He says not bad. So, I mean, is it one thing about He Kelly, you don't have to press the next button that comes up. You're able to really work around it. And then it does, because they update it all the time. Like it just updated today. It updates all the time to really keep it up to date on like whatever scenario you're in is not going to be the necessarily, because hopefully if you're thinking, you're not going to be pressing a button that is your defensive when you know you're going to need a defensive coming up next on what is that, chef on the chef and rook, or is that on brew? So you wait to save that.
There'll be a small GCD penalty associated with that, but we want to make sure that this is for accessibility purposes, that it's there for people who maybe just honestly aren't interested in the gameplay of like mastering their spec. They want to explore Azeroth and experience the story, and the mechanics kind of get in the way of that sometimes. This should be for them. Ideally, this is not a tool where someone is like being told by their raid leader to stop trying to DPS manually and just turn on the one button mode to meet some DPS check. That we want to give you the tools to kind of go through that organic progression naturally.
Great.
But so the rotation assist doesn't come with a penalty or anything like that. That's just we're going to show you what your next button is.
Exactly.
Right.
It's very similar to
So apparently, if you're using the one button, you will have a little GCD cooldown penalty. But if you're using GSE, you won't have that. It's you could just keep spamming your one button and it goes through everything. You have to adjust it, and I'm not encouraging anyone to use it, but I could tell you from when I was using it to when I wasn't on my Demon Hunter, the evidence was there that I could do more damage.
the Achilles add-on. It's kind of reflecting, just the latest kind of established theory crafting, and it's something that we would continue to update, with spec changes and class changes over time. Ideally, it all's born out of the idea that we've seen a valuable tool that players feel like they should be looking outside the game to download, and we'd rather just reduce the barriers to that and make it available to everyone.
Okay, yeah, because there's two parts to it, right? Like the advanced is, I want to really go into this, is the one button thing, but that's not necessarily everyone that's going to use this. Like, I think this game, especially new players getting into it, there's a lot going on within a particular class, and you can be a little lost trying to figure out exactly what I should be pressing. So even just using it as like as a guide to start learning your class and move off of it eventually, but just having a base understanding of what actually should I be doing at a base level of this.
Now, one of the things that if you guys are using he killing, that it won't do anything for your healers. It can and will help you with even tanking, for instance. But and the same thing can be said for GSE. But the only class that is not really available for that, and I don't want to put you guys in any bad practices. I have my own vices, and my own vice is he killing. Like anytime I talk to Hellraiser, for instance, and he's like a great player trying to teach me, he always tries to tell me get rid of he killing. I'm like, can we move past this? Because you're just beating a dead horse. I'm not getting rid of it. And through my experience, it's because I got too many other things to look for. You know, I'm downloading Plater to see what I got to kick. I got to make sure I'm looking on the floor. I got to make sure I'm looking up for frontals, and I want to make sure that I'm still doing damage. Now, you can say what you want about me as a player. I believe that I've proved myself, and I'm still improving. Finding the right class. Is it going to always be Rhett? Probably not if they keep fucking around with classes and what they can do, of course. But I want to try and master the class itself. Now keep this in mind. I do not know all the names of my class spells. It's not one of those things that I really give a fuck. I just want to be able to do damage and win and not die.
That's really exactly the motivation on our end. I mean, especially with warbands and War Within, we see lots and lots more alts, and leveling is pretty quick. You got a bunch of warbound until equipped gear that you're passing over to a new character, and just jumping into their full rotation. You've never played the spec seriously before can be a pretty serious undertaking. And for some people, this may be enough for them, and that's fine too. But we recognize that there's so much, WoW has such a high skill ceiling that just recommending what the next ability isn't going to really remove that or fully solve that. There's still the muscle memory that you need to form, and then all.
And you get, and like for instance, using Hekili, I have muscle memory. One of the things that Hekili does for me is I don't have to look down past this part of the bar. Right about this part of the bar is where everything is for your action bars, maybe your chat. But I only need to look up here, because whenever anything's up here, I'm going to have my my boss timeline over here. I'm going to have my Hekili over here. I'm going to have my health bar, the target's health bar. And then I also have another ability with LVUI where I'm able to put, like, if somebody pops Lust, I can see that exhaustion here. So knowing where your buttons are comes with a lot of practice. So I have to say that's why I've gotten good, because I don't really have to look at anything down here. Now keep in mind, I'm using a keypad, all right, because my fingers aren't, I don't have 12 fingers on one hand, and this wasn't around back in the day when I was first playing. And then I'm using the Red Dragon mouse, which is sold for like $38 versus everybody else trying to spend $120 on a Corsair or a G-Logic and everything. But this is $38. And it still comes with, it still does everything. So what I've had to do as I've gotten older, and this is for all the older players out there, because the younger players probably are like, okay, just shut the fuck up and move on with the video. These are things that you will be able to use to try and compensate for you not being as young, agile, and knowing these things. Now, another thing with the one button press, that would be something for my wife, that maybe then we can go ahead and play, because all she has to do is hit one button while we're doing content. and then I can still kind of teach her where to go next. No. Achilles is not a one-button press. No, not at all. You just have to memorize where all your buttons are. Oh, shit. Sorry, my bad.
The nuances of like, we might have a recommendation for a rotation that makes sense if you're fighting a target dummy, you're fighting patchwork, but when you need to plan around the fact that you're gonna have to move in 4 seconds, that's a whole different like layer of skill that still rests with players.
Yeah, I know when I'm trying to, play a new spec for the first time or haven't played it in years, it often feels like I've got like a 30-minute checklist of, okay, I got to set up my keybinds, got to make sure, oh, this ability's.
Now, one of the things when you're playing new specs, what's the best way for me to say this? When you're playing a new class that you have not ever played before, Achilles helps me see what are the most common buttons, and I put those in the most common places for me to hit. So a 1 button could be the most common button that I'm always going to hit. Number 2 is going to be this. F2 is going to be this, and the F1. So, wherever you put those buttons, if you don't use my scenario, like for me, I go 1 through 10, and I go F1 through F12. I say F12 because on my mouse, I'm going to be hitting, your special button on the very top to hit your F12. F11 is, it's just that, you know what I'm saying?
Changed since 2 expansions ago, I got to rebind that. And then I got to go and read some guides and figure out how all my new rotation works. And here's how the new set bonus works. So I could see it being really nice to just have this is a way to jump in to
What the fuck did I do?
some content to do with your friends and have it work out nice and easily. One thing that jumps out to me is that a lot of the content I'd want to do would be like delves or keys. And in either of those cases, there's a lot of AoE.
Yeah.
Is this going to have are we going to detect whether we're fighting 3 targets, 5 targets, and is it going to cast my Arcane Explosion instead of my Arcane Blast, or is it just always going to be a single target?
It's not just single target. There is, some sense of, how many enemies are within your range, in front of you, et cetera, and so that will affect the recommendations. Again, the goal is not optimal. The goal is not like this is going to, everyone's always going to get perfect parses and so forth going forward, but as a baseline, this should be, it should be useful the same way that many, many people find Achilles useful today. And it really, like a lot of this, building on the foundations of the cooldown manager that just came out in 11.1.5, kind of reflects us hearing people in the community telling us that they feel like they need to seek out these third-party resources just to play the game at like a baseline effective level in competitive content. And us asking, like, is that where we want the game to be in the long term, and what can we do to build in native solutions to many of these problems?
Like the base construct of it, there is this will help you learn what you're supposed to do if you are new. And then there is hey, I don't want to be the best player at this game. That's totally fine. I play it for a different reason. I want to collect things. I want to understand the story. I want to quest. I want to level, right? And I don't want to feel like I can go into any content and I just don't really know what I'm doing. I feel anxious about that. Like you have the ability to just be
like, if I could get my wife to play on my account and they unleash this, I'll be like, babe, just level my guy. I'm going to bed for a little bit. This is your stream. Come and level my guy. Get me some subs.
okay, well, at least Blizzard's got me. I can have something at a base level where I can press one button and just kind of hang out and play the game. I have one question about the actual rotational thing. So is that going to change with talent? So let's say, is it going to work off the base talent build, or let's say you select a talent that now moves a AoE button into your single target rotation? Is it going to be smart enough or planned to be smart enough?
It should be. Everything that Ian's been saying has been built around Achilles. So if they have people as smart as they should be, Achilles does exactly that. If you're not a fan of Achilles, then great. But if you are someone that thinks you might need some help because you're trying to get carried in groups and you're signing up to all the streams, you know it, I know it, everybody knows it, you're there looking for some help. So what we as streamers provide you with is a service to get something good out of Vault. But you don't want to fail and you don't want to look bad, because I'm telling you, there are certain groups that get put together. I just saw one today where even you can frustrate the streamer, not you by yourself. It could be the entirety of the group. But what Achilles does is it on the fly will tell you and change the spell that you hit. It'll also give you a suggestion of what you should hit. If you remember when I said that, you don't have to hit that button. Go to the next one when you know you're going to need that defensive for something else.
Enough to incorporate a bunch of different potential talent builds.
The goal is that it's aware of your talents, and the logic is conditional based on what you do or don't have talented. As with, this is going to be something that continues to evolve. We may not have every single possible permutation accounted for in the version that we roll out with, but it should still be very useful in that form to everyone, and we'll just get refined from there. Similar to the cooldown manager that we know is like, that is a first take at this. We have plans to add much more customization, much more functionality to that over time as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting feature individually. The thing that's most exciting to me is in the broader context of the cooldown manager, of all these other edit mode changes that have come out. There was a time 5 years ago in WoW where if you were just getting into the game, there was an intimidating list of these are the add-ons that you need, and if you're not using these, you're kind of worse, right? Like you're noticeably worse. If you can't track your group members' major cooldown, right? Like,
okay, now I don't know. Now there are add-ons that you want to do for that, but for me, I don't give a fuck. So like they have an interrupt tracker that you could download. Like I'm trying to go with the minimal of weak auras and shit on my screen. Everybody complains that I had a lot of shit before. So when I had to reinstall the game, I lost all of my weak auras and my add-ons. So we really tried to go with the basics. And the basics was DBM, the sound alerts, losing your mouse. Like, I don't know if you guys have been in fights where like everything's fucking crazy on the stream, but you could lose your mouse. So I got ultimate cursor and I still lose my mouse. I'm not shitting you. I still lose it from time to time. There are certain things, but you don't want to clog up because not only that, but it uses resources on your computer. And as all of us are not, so gifted to have, the newest computer. Like mine right now is going on, 4 years? The mouse weak aura has been huge for me. Yeah, I mean, so it's one of those things that you want to try and put into use that you really need. Like, do I really need to have an interrupt tracker? Just kick every fucking thing that you can. But there's another thing that we have called a weak aura. So the weak aura is called Plater. You could use Quasi or you could use Mo. I believe in Mo, it probably needs to be developed and updated a little bit more because I really don't know which are the must kicks. And that's the thing when you're doing Mythic Plus. When you're doing Raid, there's not that many, it's not that hard. Maybe when you get Mythic, but it's not a big deal.
you're worse at Mythic Plus than somebody who is, right? And it seems like the goal that has been accomplished with a lot of these things that have been coming into the base UI is you can use those add-ons if you want, but we now have a native way to the game that you don't have to get an add-on.
That is pretty much exactly our long-term philosophical goal here, right? Like, add-ons are amazing. The things that the community has done over the last 20 years to allow people to experience different aesthetics, different functionality, have information available at their fingertips, like, that is a huge part of WoW's success, and we don't question or want to undermine that for a moment. At the same time, like, as you said, ideally, it is about what do you want? How do you prefer to have things presented to you, and not what do you have to do? What is a group mate or raid leader or whatever telling you you must download? Or if you ask people, you know, hey.
Yeah, like there's a certain add-on that we have in my guild that gives notes to everybody. Now, mostly this pertains to anyone that has responsibility to do a certain mechanic. A lot of times that might be on the healers or the ranged, but I believe it's called Exodore. Somebody might want to correct me. But I believe it's that. So you should see, when they enact it, you should see where your name is and what you're assigned to.
How can I get better? I'm really struggling at this. the first answer shouldn't be, well, download this add-on, this add-on, and this add-on, otherwise you're doing it wrong. Because that's starting to get into that mandatory place, whether we like it or not. So yeah, I think, longer term, these initiatives kind of fit into part of how we're thinking about the role of add-ons in WoW. As we can probably all agree, today there is a sense that if you want to really be the best you can, if you want to play competitive content, there are certain add-ons that are required, that are simply going to improve your success over not having them, period. We would like to get away from that being the case. I think I'd love to see a WoW one day where you can still customize the aesthetic look of your UI, you can have information and quest helpers and all the other things that you might want to have to make your experience a bit more seamless. But that at the end of the day, when you're in competitive content, when you're queuing up for a rated PvP match, when you're going into a high key, when you're trying to get a first kill on a raid boss, there isn't the sense that you are, just holding yourself back if you're not using specific tools. We know that there's a lot of work to do to get to a place where that could be the reality. The first steps really are going to be continuing to build up the just right out of the box functionality that World of Warcraft offers to shrink that gap. But at the same time, I think we're aware that at the very end of this process, we probably are going to have to rein in some of the functionality that add-ons currently have to do like...
Right there. If you didn't hear that, we are probably going to have to rein in the purpose that weak auras have. You know it, I know it, everybody knows it. Blizzard is always good for taking something and making it better. But at what pace? What pace will they be able to do these things? So like we have the cooldown manager now. The many videos that I watch, which is why I don't try to flood my YouTube channel with just the echo chamber. I always try to listen to different takes and let it cook. Let it cook a little bit, because everybody doesn't like where it is presently, but they're not done. This is like the first iteration of it. This is like their first go at it. So it'll get better over time. They're going to be working on it. And the same can be said for like the, for the rotation assist and things like that. So don't expect it to be spot on.
Real-time in-combat problem solving specifically, where it's like automating coordination, communication in ways that are always going to be better than anything the UI could natively provide you, as long as they remain possible.
Yeah, so that moves us into like raid bosses, where I don't want to name any names, but there are people who have optimized a little bit of their own fun out of the game sometimes. I don't know where any of them might be sitting.
He might be talking about Max. So look right here. Max gives him a look right here.
Fun out of the game sometimes. I don't know where any of them.
He's talking about Max.
Might be sitting. They could be anywhere. They could be in this room with us.
Hey man, I am the number one. Let's just YOLO this. Let's just do the fight. Let's make it work. And then sometimes it gets to let's try to make something that could be 95% successful, 100 or 99, right? And there's a lot of frustration with the tech involved with that. I would definitely be. I think a lot of the rating community would be pretty for that. I think a well-designed mechanic that the game giving you enough information to solve this on your own realistically. A lot of the times the community will just use one because it's like what everyone else uses. It gets you in the same place. But if that doesn't exist and the game is giving you that information, it's objectively better, right?
And even if you are doing it very well, manually, it's always going to be better to do it perfectly in a competitive situation. I mean, having watched, your raid leading, for example, over many, many years over the Race to World First, like years ago, you would call much more stuff verbally.
Very
like
true.
Going back to, Legion, BFA era, whereas nowadays it seems like if there is something you're calling repeatedly on attempts, the first thing you're doing is asking if, hey, can we automate this and get me out of the business of talking, which seems like it might be less enjoyable for you as a raid leader.
Yeah. Oh, if we're talking about that, I could talk all day about that. Yeah. No. I mean, I felt like you certainly had more of an impact when you had the ability to, influence the fight more. But the reality is just getting some way to automate it for your players is just better. It is funny. Like when I do that now, I think, what else can I be doing with my time? I could be like looking at other ways to optimize, and it's purely for the sake of getting better. So yeah, for my own enjoyment, yeah, that's sweet. Let's do that. I'm trying to wonder also about those kind of mechanics. So like what bosses have existed in my head, I think in the past couple of years, there's not many, but have been defined by when we're progressing this boss, we feel like maybe we're progressing a weak aura. Something like Brood Twister or Echo of Neltharion or Jailer maybe was one of the first ones, right? And those mechanics, I feel like, could not have been done or probably would have been nerfed without weak auras or having that effectiveness of that reduced. What do you do as a fight designer now? Do you I know you're obviously like really passionate about raiding. You've raided for a really long time. What do you have to avoid those kind of assignment mechanics? Are there things in game you can use to like naturally sort out those things? Like, do you give more time for the mechanics? Like do you have to stray away from assignments in general because the community has just, whether you like it or not, has like trained themselves to have something solve that for them? Do you have to like go back into like a more simple version of that? Do you find other ways to make fights difficult? There's obviously a bunch of ways to do that.
The way we design encounters has been influenced in significant ways by the way players use add-ons. I know, the community
Hey,
sometimes
Monarch, how you doing, buddy?
speculates that this was built clearly to require an add-on. I can say that's never the case. No encounter designer is ever sitting around saying, all right, we're going to make this mechanic, and then players will write this weak aura to solve it this way. All right, mission accomplished. Let's ship.
See, but I've never. Okay, so I've never been in a mythic guild. I've always been somebody that's been heroic, and then if I can get a few bosses down in mythic, that's where I'm at. But I've never been in a mythic guild, so my mindset would probably change if I was in a mythic guild, because then now that becomes my purpose. I would love to know what you guys think about being in a heroic guild that is supposed to be a social guild, and maybe they do want to get like one or two bosses down in mythic, like it. And then I would like to know if there's anybody that's in a mythic guild, like your mindset there. What is that like? I mean, do you live, breathe, eat nothing but logs, nothing but videos, nothing but talking with your guildies? You're in a mythic guild. Just click a button and boom, done. Yeah. Okay. I'm just curious because that's got to be a different lifestyle. Now I'm all for it. Don't get me wrong. If it's one thing that I love more than life, okay, don't take that out of context. But if there's anything that I love about the game itself, I love raiding. Now, what I have found this season is that there is nothing that I need out of raid. Why do I say that? Because once again, as you know, and I know, I always like to bring in Archon. All right. Like, I bring in Archon and I'm looking at everything that I have that on Mythic. Once I get Dinars, I'm going to get that on Mythic. I have this, and then I'll be able to level that up. I have this, which I'm pretty sure I'm going to need something different because we get 2 fucking item levels or something like that. I have that. I play a lot. I'm a degenerate when it comes to this. So what I'm trying to say to you all, and plus I haven't been playing alts. So I've just been maining one character this season. So it's going to be something that I'm very curious on. So like I just crafted my new feed. Does that help you? I don't know. So like when you want to be a mythic player, take what I'm telling you right now and then times that by 10, because they do even more.
The boss. But when we're thinking about the overall pacing of a fight, the tuning, the
Dinars are on May 13th. May 1-3.
Might get feedback on a fight that it feels like there isn't enough going on, when in actuality, there are 4 or 5 mechanics going on, but add-ons are largely compartmentalizing and making it so that most players don't have to think about them most of the time. And then players give us feedback that, hey, this fight felt a little bit slow, like I was just punching the boss for 3 minutes. And so then maybe we add another mechanic in the next iteration of that, or a similar encounter. We get to a higher overall complexity space where, there's just, you look at the dungeon journal and you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and maybe half of it doesn't even matter because add-ons are going to handle it for you. I think that's not a great place for things to land. It also definitely ties our hands in some ways. Like, I think we do fewer coordination mechanics than we used to. Like, there used to be, like, if you look at old school WoW days, there were encounters where, like, the primary challenge for your raid was by design coordinating some rotation. And the execution beyond that wasn't super complicated.
See, I don't know what they're talking about. This is all Spanish to me, so I don't really know what they're referring to because I wasn't there doing these kind of mechanics.
But making sure that this thing stayed soaked, or that you were rotating people through with their debuff or whatever, that became a big part of the fight's challenge. Now we know ultimately that that can never be the thing that we lean on for challenge, because it's going to be solved, and it's not going to be solved through what we think of as the more just interesting MMOE, like communication, cooperation, figuring out systems for having these things work in a way that feels collaborative. It's going to be downloading the weak aura pack, setting it up appropriately.
You do it, I do it.
3 or 4 frustrating wipes because there was a typo in the configuration. That's not what I think anyone really wants raiding to be. And so we move away from making those mechanics as much and lean more on things that add-ons can't solve for you, like moving out of a swirly under your feet with only a little bit of time to respond. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that more and more of our fights have those sorts.
That boss is the worst boss to me. This boss here, God damn it. That takes me away from my character, and I have to get on a ball to do this stuff here. Worst fucking encounter that I have done.
More and more of our fights have those sorts of just like twitch reaction, avoidance mechanics, whereas that used to be one type of fight that we did. The design space is definitely constrained by the knowledge that, if we lean on it too heavily, it's just going to get trivialized.
Some of my favorite WoW raid boss memories are bosses like Mythic Unat, Mythic Anduin. You have to spread out and then you get these marks and you have to go to the right places. And there used to be definitely a library of mechanics like that where you would get them and then you'd have to think and you'd have to have like a system and you'd have to have 20 players sort of coordinate and become one team that does a mechanic like that. And the fact now that add-ons take on much of that job of coordinating us, I think that almost all the Mythic Raiders I know would be delighted to move back to a world where we did that in our brains, right? But in Dragonflight, we saw a little bit of an attempt to make that happen, right, with the private aura system. And what ended up happening was we still had the weak aura, but now we also have a macro that we need to press, and then the weak aura will assign us the same thing. So I'm a little bit worried, how's the arms race between the weak aura devs trying to come up with a new way around the restriction that you're putting in? Is this just a further escalation in that?
Hopefully not. I think our goal here is kind of disarmament and definitely not further escalation. I think we understand that if we...
All right, so they're talking about shit I have no clue on. So this is kind of like for those 1%ers out there. And I'm sorry that you might want to hear it. If you do, I'll put the link down below so you can see the video without my commentary at all. But like this to me, I don't give a fuck.
And so I think down the line eventually, that may mean, I think,
I just want my AOTC, that's it. If I get cutting edge, I'm going to die. Swear to God. If I ever get cutting edge, that means I'm about to die. There's going to be the Grim Reaper at my door. It says, you have done everything that you've not needed to do here, so come with me. And I'll be like, oh no.
Some encounters, how some of our classes work. I think there are tons of add-ons that are healthy and valuable and really important to how players play the game that do rely on that flow of information. Everything from something as simple as damage meters to honestly, boss ability timelines, like the DBM style, like when is this next ability going to fire that people have basically been raiding with forever. That's not the computational weak auras. That's just, hey, this ability is going to happen in 15 seconds. Like, we want to build in our own version of that. I think down the line, we'd love to see a place where there is a boss timeline as just part of the encounter UI. And that's not something you need an add-on for. And that way we can hopefully eventually get to a point where we're really just cutting out the weak aura that solves the mechanic for you but not the informational stuff that you feel like, it really feels like the game should have been telling you all along, where add-ons are, admittedly, kind of filling in some gaps there.
Okay, so coming in 11.1.7, we're going to have the rotation helper, those two options. What of the rest of this initiative, is any of the rest of this in 11.1.7, or are we just starting the conversation now?
I think there's a lot of stuff that we're working on. I think, we've seen the cooldown manager and then the rotation assist coming. I think down the line, it's some of the stuff that I touched on. I don't have specific patch dates right now, but we are looking at damage meters. We're looking at nameplate improvements. We are looking at, rate, like a rating counter.
One of the things that I really would like to see WoW get to is the elimination of weak auras and add-ons to a point. So like you might still use handy notes when you're trying to go out there, or so like I use an add-on for dialogue to make it look prettier and shit like that, because there's not many of us that'll go out and do a quest and actually read every text that is there. You just look for the objective and then you hit accept and you're done. So what makes this game so much different than Final Fantasy XIV is that we're all gear driven. And it's one of the things that we don't want to go to any other game for, is because we're always trying to get more gear. Numbers go up. You've heard it in every video that we've watched. You guys know it. So one of the things that I believe that we want is that, like, one of the things that I also think we've lost is the sociability of WoW. So back in the day, when you wanted to put a group together, you had to kind of spam to get a group together. Then they threw in looking for group, and things like that. So maybe I'm just talking out my ass,
Information presentation that shows you timeline of boss abilities coming up. Things in that general space. I think we're looking at all the places where players say right now, you need this weak aura, you need this add-on to be competitive, and asking ourselves, like, how do we change our game to make that not the case? And some of that's going to be add-on functionality, or UI functionality. Other aspects are going to be looking at how we're building some encounters or how some class mechanics work. Like, I think it's super fair to point at some specs, like, let's say Outlaw Rogue, who I know are easy one to pick on in some of these ways, and ask, like, how is anyone really supposed to execute this perfectly with the base UI? Almost any time we're tracking like stacks of a buff, and you need to make a decision where it's like, if you're between 4 and 7 stacks, you should do this, otherwise don't. Those are not reasonable tests for us to be posing to our players without providing them the information to do it correctly. And so we need to either provide the information, simplify the mechanic, or both.
There are a lot of players who love the version of Outlaw Rogue that it has existed over the past few years. So I think there's always some fear when this discussion starts up of, is the answer going to be to simplify everything? And I think it's really...
I got to ask you right now, do you think that Dratnos has hair on his ass? I'm just saying, because the man is fucking hairy.
really exciting to hear instead that the answer is, okay, we'll maybe simplify some of these huge outliers, but we're going to bring in the functionality that makes it so that instead of needing to download a weak aura to solve this, right, instead of needing to have a complicated assistant tell you, now you're supposed to press this button, now you're supposed to press this button, instead we're going to provide that information in a more clear way than looking at the top right of your screen to see your buffs and trying to catch the rotation buff between all the other 20.
Well, that's one thing that I've always said. One of the things that I wanted to have, for instance, you need a weak aura if I'm going strictly off of prop pally. So when you're trying to make sure that you are in defensive mode, or you have your shit on the ground, that you're the timer of when to hit that again. Other than that, I just have Achilles to tell me, hey, you need to press this button.
Changing in combat?
That's definitely the goal. I think we want World of Warcraft to be as approachable as possible, but we also love that the skill ceiling in the game is as incredibly high as it is. That allows for tons of differentiation and self-expression and accomplishment. But I think, a lot of, at its core, a lot of skill in WoW, I think, boils down to multitasking ability. And like even just, you might be able to do amazing damage just testing it against a target dummy. Very different world when you're also in an encounter and need to do 3 mechanics at the same time. And we see, tunnel visioning DPS are a meme for a reason, right? They're just focused on their rotation, and whoops, they just messed up the encounter mechanic.
I've done that. I've done that recently. But one of the things that I also think is that when you're trying to put together something like this, it's going to be more or less the player themselves at the keyboard. What is it that they can do that is going to make them better? My hub told me I'm gonna play this game and get good at it to learn without using a rotation helper, and that if he ever saw me using one, he would never play with me anymore. Well, then he should come play with me, because I bet you I could put your husband to shame.
Or vice versa, someone who is good at mechanics, but their DPS goes off a cliff. Really, like, the function of a lot of these add-ons is to offload a portion of that computational complexity. And we recognize, like, if we are removing some of that functionality.
You have him do a key with me. You have him do a key with me, Jen, and if I beat him using a rotation helper, I want to see what he says. Now, keep in mind, it doesn't just go based off of damage. It doesn't go based off of damage. It also goes based off of avoidable damage. It also goes based off of kicks. So you have to throw in the whole package there. One of the things that I would like them to throw in is called an MVP vote. MVP. Who got MVP for that?
We're providing more information. We can probably remove a couple of mechanics, but still keep the same level of challenge. The goal is not.
So that means I definitely could have him beat.
Not to make it easier. The goal is to make it less complex. And I think that's, I think it's a key distinction there, because I think it often can sound like, oh, this is about, this might be about dumbing down the game or simplifying things. It's not that. It's about trying to create a more approachable baseline experience that still has every bit as much room for differentiation.
When you were talking about add-ons that things have been in the game, been inspired by it, you mentioned a damage meter.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in just what your view is, philosophy-wise, about damage meters in games like this.
That's a great question, and I think ultimately we have to be guided by.
What do you guys think about damage meters, by the way? Are damage meters toxic? Do you guys use them in a negative manner? One of the things in Final Fantasy XIV why they don't want to invite them in is because people they like to gloat. You've seen me do it. I'm raising my hand. I can be toxic when it comes to that because I always believe that I should never be beating anybody. I am an example. So, and then like I don't even go into examining what the damage meter is. So like I don't give a fuck. I just want to see my number at the top. People in Final Fantasy XIV use damage meters. Yeah, they use ACT. I did. I'm not gonna lie.
What our community prefers and what we see them doing today. The single most popular add-on used across the entire game is a damage meter by like a fair margin.
Okay.
The majority of players.
Wait, whoa. Looks like Achilles might actually be doing damage now. Bro, I've been doing damage. Oh my goodness, you guys are fucking trolling me right now.
Large majority of players have a damage meter add-on installed.
You've been trolling me.
And so that indicates that people want to see that information, at least about themselves. We definitely want more nuanced measures of success and understanding, like how successful were you or how much did you contribute on this run, highlighting things like interrupts, highlighting things like avoid.
That's what I'm saying. Add an MVP meter. Who gets MVP? You all get to vote. Who is the MVP? It could bring toxicity, sure, but it could give them as an added bonus. How about you give them like an extra currency that they need, whether it be Valor Stones or Gilded Crest or Rune Crest.
Damage to give a fuller picture of performance, but at the end,
I took you into 14 and you were nowhere ready, bro. I would kick your ass right now. Trust. Trust. I would kick your ass in Final Fantasy 14. I haven't been there in a year.
End of the day, I think for someone who's trying a new spec, trying a new talent build, getting a new trinket, and they want to see like how did this affect my performance compared to the last run, that's an important piece of information to have. And so I think we know that in any world where we were going to limit some of the ability of add-ons to like again do that real-time combat event tracking, we would need to provide a damage meter solution of our own. And I think one of the exciting things is I think if we're doing that on our end, we can also have it be server authoritative, so you're not worried about like who's in a different combat phase, who's out of range, or whatever. Yeah. It could just be like, this is official and going to be accurate all the time.
We were obviously mostly thinking about Mythic Raid when our brains go to how this is going to affect things, but the overwhelming majority of players are in heroic raids, normal raids, raid finder raids, doing Mythic Plus dungeons, right? When we're talking about making these changes to what weak auras can do, is there an appetite for changing how heroic and normal raids function as well? Like, do we see these problems in there as well for what add-ons can do and how they solve things?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it all trickles down, right? I mean, I think maybe even more, a larger percentage of players doing Mythic Raid might use specific weak aura packs than, let's say, normal. But those add-ons are used by the majority of players right now, and certainly other, boss mods are as well. And I think a lot of it just comes down to, what are the coordination challenges that we're presenting? If there's something that everyone is relying on a tool right now.
Like for instance, one thing that weak auras could not do for you, Queen Ansarek, even on heroic, because I never even touched it on Mythic. One of the hardest bosses for coordinating pugs that I've ever seen in my life. For you, like, I spent 5 fucking hours on one boss. Besides Black Myth Wukong, this is about the longest boss that I've ever done. Is that what they're talking about when it comes to coordination? I believe it is. It's just so very complex, very complex. Now, the other one was also in the very first dungeon of Dragonflight, which was Razageth. Did I say that right, Raz? Where you really had to try and set up coordination. From every time that I did it on Discord, because I was hosting raids for heroic to help people get their AOTC, and it was truly something that was tough. It was tough.
To assist with, we would have to change it to still keep it the same level of challenging, but without that same automation assistance. And that can take many forms. It can be there's 1 or 2 fewer things to soak. You have an extra couple of seconds to like actually spread out on the fly. It's a pretty common mechanic of like, all right, 3 people get a debuff and they just have to like run out in different directions from each other. People have been just kind of playing the game and doing those for years and years. But of course, if you can if the time you're given to react is so tight that you can't afford to do that, then people do gravitate towards, all right, we're going to put diamond, circle, and triangle on the ground. Everyone's going to get an auto-assigned marker, and you just know, like, I'm going to run to my marker to guarantee that it's executed correctly. I think it's a bit more interesting if we give you a couple of seconds so that you can look around and make sure you're not running in the same direction, and then do the exact same thing. I mean, at the end of the day, raiding in particular, but group PvE, group PvP too. Like in an MMO, a huge portion of, I think, the fun of it is just coordination, communication, feeling like everyone's working together to overcome some challenge in front of them. And I think getting back into a space where there's room for more of that organic collaboration, as opposed to it just being like regimented and solved by an external tool, I think like will open up a lot of design avenues for the game going forward.
Throughout the last couple years, especially in Mythic Plus, that had been ramping in complexity, you've seen, and actually even if you can go back, like you can see the amount of things that people have in their UI to help them know that something's happening. So like back in Power Auras, it was, there was just some giant some giant face on your screen would pop up, and that meant that something procced. And then it's gotten more refined. And now, even in it's been ramping the past couple of years, you see like, you listen to someone's POV who's doing High Mythic Plus right now, you're gonna hear AoE, dodge, frontal, circle.
Yep. And I've loved those. One of the best additions that I believe that we've had in Weak Auras, like you could literally take everything that is talking on my screen off, but I enjoy the notification in my ear. Because keep in mind, I'm looking at mechanics, I'm looking at Plater, I'm looking at Achilles. So when something comes in my ear saying dodge, fuck yeah, I got you.
Like, it's just every bit of audio aid they've used to it's in the idea of being optimal. It's not required. And especially this patch, I think Mythic Plus complexity has actually gone down as an intentional design point. It seems, at least. I think you might have made a post about that. So that stuff is less required, but people have like kind of already baked that in the UI. Is that something that you're looking to either have an ability to have that in the game, or is that something you don't want to have happen, where it's more like you're organically doing mechanics because you see them, or are you okay with all of the audio and visual aids that exist currently within add-ons?
I think the answer is mixed there. I think like audio prompts are something that are super valuable to people. That's something we want to continue to add support for on our end as well. Like, we know we've got feedback we've gotten around the 11.1.5 cooldown manager would be that many people would appreciate being able to have audio prompts tied to certain things, or procs firing, and that's something they would miss about weak auras. We want to make sure that we're offering that kind of thing as well.
Now, one of the things that I am curious about, and I don't mind if they involve themselves doing their own DBM. I really don't want them to take away my audio cues, because it's one of those things that has helped me. Like, if you're playing Final Fantasy 14, a lot of people there, since they don't have add-ons, they're listening to the verbal cues of the boss. And they do that here as well. So I like hearing, I like having, so like Days of Thunder, Tom Cruise movie. I need Harry in my ear. Guess what? Hey, Ganja, how you doing, brother?
Beyond that, I think a lot of what we've seen is, frankly, us not doing a sufficiently good job of telegraphing the importance of certain mechanics and their impact, and players needing to come up with solutions for them externally. Ideally, there's a concept that we call affordance, which is basically just how well is something telegraphed, how intuitive is it with visual presentation, and ideally, the affordance of a mechanic should match its impact. And sometimes, yeah, if you have a random mob in a dungeon pack that has a frontal that will just delete you if you're not getting out of the way of it, and it's just one thing going on among a half dozen other things, why? And why? Like, how could we call that out better with visuals, with...
Well, they've done a really good job on the swirlies. I'll give them that. And I've seen, for instance, in Throne, Theater of Pain, sorry, not Throne, fucking Neo. Theater of Pain, they're working on the frontals on that. Let's work on all the frontals. Let's work on all of them.
A longer cast time, with how we're creating the pack in the first place. And that's just one example of one of the areas in which we know we can do better. Something else we've talked about on the UI front is we would want the ability to, on our end, flag mob casts in Mythic Plus as like lethal.
It's one of those things, like I hate to keep comparing the two, Final Fantasy 14 and WoW. But one of the reasons that I was so good in Final Fantasy 14 as a new player is because it was very well communicated. And I was able to do Savage, content. I don't think I ever did an ultimate, but my point is that this game was earlier, and I believe that they can look at everything. So when everybody started the Exodus, when everybody was doing the Exodus of Shadowlands, by the way, when everybody was doing the Exodus of Shadowlands, and we all went to other games, I landed in Final Fantasy 14. So I got to see what it was with a prolonged cooldown. I got to see what it was like for their dungeons, So like, instead of 5, they go with 4. And some of the raids they go with 8 instead of 10. There's just there's a big difference. There's a big difference. Now, the reason that we all like this girlfriend and not the other girlfriend is because this girlfriend, she will basically kick your ass. You know, the other girlfriend, she might punch you in the arm and says, I'm not, you know, I'm maybe that's the wrong metaphor, but what I'm trying to say, it wasn't so punishing. It wasn't so punishing. Whereas WoW will just delete you, you will get folded, and then people leave the key. Now, totally different environments, but, you know, this game just has my heart. How about that? Can I say that? This game just has my heart. I want to play this game. And I just want it to look kind of like that other game in a way that kind of communicates things to me so I'm not dying to things that I should have seen. So we always have like red on red, green on green. How about you just kind of define it a little bit so that I'm not getting killed by shit that I should be seeing? And I know that you guys do it all the time, and we've been doing it for so many years, but how about all the new people?
It's like, this should be a high priority interrupt.
How you doing, Good Shepherd?
Because we know players are going to basically look to solve that anyway. If there are 3 casters in a pack, and 2 of them, it's actually kind of okay to let them free cast, but one of them, if they ever get a cast off, you're probably going to wipe. They shouldn't all just look indistinguishable on your screen, and us expect you to figure that out on your own.
They did that in season 1, right? Wasn't there like a couple casts or like super giga you die death volley or something?
Yeah.
And they
Yeah, that was Necrotic Wake, right? Wasn't that Necrotic Wake in season 1? Or was that season 2? No, we're in season 2. So season 1 was Necrotic Wake. And if you let those volleys go off, oh no.
had this big
It's
animation.
the Arcara casters where they hunker down, there's green glowy stuff around them, and they're casting a volley, and you're like, all right, I gotta kick
You
that.
could be playing WoW for 2 days, and
Yeah.
you're like, that's
not
not
happening,
that
yeah.
that can't happen. Yes.
But I'm looking forward to an M+ then, where if we're talking about maybe taking away my ability to air horn myself on a certain cast, something like that, if instead I have to be now looking at a mob and there is a sort of a visual language that I can come to expect, like if the mob is hunkering down and it's got particle effects around it, that means I gotta kick it. I think that would be more fun for everybody as well, rather than having the air horns be the solution.
Yeah, so like one of the things he's talking about right here is like like everyone's able to set up their weak auras so different, and since I'm such a smooth brain, I go to Plater, and I look for Plater to tell me that green is fine, orange is semi, and then red must stop. But if you're not somebody that's so involved in the scene, you're not going to know. If you're not running Plater, by the way, you're not going to know. It's one of those things that you have to put so much involvement into it. It becomes too complex for anyone that just wants to come in and learn. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to fix that for new players, because guess what? We've been in this game for, I'm going to say 25 years. If you were playing 30 years, if you've been playing like StarCraft and Warcraft, and then, you know, things of that, the IP is like 30 years old, but we just celebrated 20. So I'm really curious, like, how do you get new people to come in without being discouraged and want to leave? They could do like a red warning icon or something on enemies that cast a dangerous thing. Yeah.
Definitely.
That is entirely our hope, right? I think, and just to be super clear, you know, I think we see the taking away part, the restricting functionality, as the end of this long road. I think we know, we want to make it very clear, we're not sitting here being like, all right, we want you to play the game the way we intended, and we're going to take away your tools. We just want to bridge that gap, and we have a lot of work to do on.
So right here in that sentence, at the end, however long that journey is going to be, they want to eliminate add-ons, maybe weak auras.
Our end, to keep building up more improvements, more functionality. And it's not just the UI. The VFX changes that you mentioned are a part of that overall effort of us asking, what are the places where players feel like they need add-ons to succeed? Why is that the case? And when it's like, it's not clear when you're standing in something, and so I need, GTFO or some other, sound effect to let me know that I'm standing in something lethal, it should be obvious. Let's fix that on our end. And we know we want to keep.
Now, to be fair, I got rid of GTFO, and I've been doing fine. One reason I got out of it is because it's so fucking annoying to fucking hear all that shit in your ears all the time, and it's so loud. So I got rid of that, and I haven't been standing in a lot of shit. But do I still have to get a couple seconds out and I freed them? Yeah, sure. But you can learn how to play without a lot of these.
Chipping away at those things, and hopefully eventually get to a point where really the only difference between what we are offering and what powerful add-ons can do is that small subset of like computational problem-solving stuff, at which point we can move forward.
So throughout the evolution of private auras, we've seen, initially when they came out, they were like kind of, a lot of friction was involved. And then I think they were done really, really well in a couple of cases, starting in Yggdrasil, where they were a mechanic like P1 Fire Act. You had the circles you had to quickly spread out for. They were pretty fast, but they were too fast to use a macro for it. And it basically forced the players into something they would have used a weak aura for, to just do the mechanic normally. And like, are there lessons you've learned there of like, this is actually how we can design mechanics or kind of assignment things going forward? And then also, is this, if done successfully, would this also remove private auras as what would have been, I guess, kind of a temporary solution to the weak aura problem?
Yeah, we've definitely learned a lot from how private auras have rolled out. Certainly we understand that if we're ever using it on something that like is on a long enough time frame that macros are going to let you solve it and it's punishing enough to not solve it, all we're doing is creating an extra annoying hoop to jump through, and we like hot-fixed off the private aura designation from some of those back in Yggdrasil, and we've let that shape how and where we use or don't use it going forward. And so yeah, I think examples like the Furak mechanic that you mentioned are ones where like when we know that everyone is in a level playing field, everyone just has to play the game, play the mechanic. We can tune it accordingly so that it's hard but doable. We'd like to be able to do more of that for sure.
Yeah, I see the Fire Act first intermission, which was a private aura and then had to get hot fixed off of the private aura, as sort of a cautionary tale for if there's a mechanic that is only doable with the weak aura assignments, and then we take away that without giving an adequate replacement, then it's worse than doing nothing at all. What would a mechanic like that look like in a world where we don't have a computational solution to it, right? Would it be slower and fewer sets of like lower damage numbers on these things?
I think probably a bit of all of that. There's multiple knobs there. There's, on Mythic we might default to like everyone in today's world, everyone in the raid has to participate in this, and there's enough things to be soaked that if anyone isn't doing it, it's not going to work out. Versus maybe shifting to a world where there's a little bit more slush, things are a little bit slower, there's a little bit more time to react, to get into place organically based on which buff you were assigned, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, our goal here is to preserve challenge, and we know that we'd have to design encounters differently in some cases to deliver roughly the same level of challenge in terms of how many pull counts it takes, just what progression looks like, while living in a different mechanical world. And I know that when we talk about restricting any kind of add-on functionality, many players very rightly, kind of reflexively say or ask, well, how am I supposed to do this boss in this tier without my weak aura? That would be impossible. And the reality is, if you couldn't use that weak aura, that mechanic would be designed or tuned differently. We would have ended up nerfing it right away or designing it differently over the course of even just PTR testing. And so that's like any future design in this space will have to be built from the ground up with that in mind. And I think it's making it a little bit more forgiving in a way that makes the challenge human rather than superhuman, as it often is when we're looking at like cutting edge mythic tuned things. Because you guys are really good at the game, as it turns out, and we want to make a boss that is going to pose a challenge and is going to take you dozens of attempts, let alone 100 plus to beat. we do have to take into account the fact that not just you, but every Mythic raid guild that's going to follow in your footsteps are going to be using these tools. And at the end of the day, I think players do want challenging bosses. That if, we just tuned the boss around none of those things, players used all those tools, and they went in and like a late Mythic boss was dying in a single night for like, a cutting edge guild, rank 500 or whatever, that probably doesn't match what they're looking to get out of Mythic raiding. In my estimation. And so like our goal is to keep the same overall level of challenge while paring down the complexity a little bit.
Even if you look at the history of bosses this would have affected.
What I'm looking for is for like, say you're an AOTC guild, all right? You're an AOTC guild. I'm looking for the first 4 out of 8 to be puggable. Can you do that so that we could at least fill up 2 slots in our vault? Would that be so wrong? I'm just saying.
Actually, even looking at Mythic Plus, something where the complexity has gone down from pack to pack in this patch, but the reality is you can still find challenge in it because it's infinitely scaling, and you will get to a point where it's doing too much damage to you, or the amount of damage you need to do is
Max has way too much coffee in his system. His legs are moving like crazy. I don't know what the fuck's going on with that guy, or maybe he's just nervous.
too high. There's been Mythic bosses that have been simple mechanically, but have been unbelievably difficult. And that's been true all the way down the guild ranks. It's not something that's just nerfed by gear. Like
Max is always like that.
Sludge Fist, Kaiveza, where you've created really intricate problems to solve where weak auras basically didn't matter. Halandris, you actually put a bomb timer very clearly in the game around the bomb. You did not need a weak aura for one of the hardest bosses ever, right? It's more just basically the solution for these weak auras has been just a very specific kind of assignment mechanic that is just like, oh, it's just so much easier to do this, right? You could build in a lot of that computational stuff in game to where even if weak auras existed, you would find people just being like, I don't know, the game just kind of does it. We have players that don't use audio sounds in weak aura packs because on bosses like Skarn, on most other bosses, there's like either an in-game sound for when the bombs are actually activating or a voice line. We have 2 players in our guild that use very minimal weak auras, and they literally listen to voice lines for when mechanics are going to happen, and it's extremely accurate, right? So I think a lot of these things are already built into the baseline game. It's just about choosing like when and how to apply them.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think your example, going back to Nathri of Sludge Fist, I think is a great one, right? Like a lot of that.
No. Chuck, if they remove heat killing, you just go to GSE. I've never publicly said this, but I will say it now. For a very minimal time, I was turned on to an add-on called GSE. This add-on was a 1-button rotation. And you can ask Neo, how are my numbers used in Heat-Killy versus GSE? So I used it for a little while. What I saw was that in the rotation was Skyreach, my monk. And when I was doing Mythic Plus, I want to say in season 2 of Dragonflight, Skyreach, I had the talent where it would just take you in. It would put me in a bad situation. I'd get killed. But if you know how to edit such a program, not a problem. But I didn't keep it very long.
That was just practice and just learning like how to react to these situations when chained to different partners and dodging the stuff. And people were in enough situations over enough time. They kind of develop that muscle memory, that sense of planning, and eventually your guild as a whole overcomes the challenge. Compared to, let's say, the Stone Legion generals that came after it, a couple of issues there, but like one of the central mechanics that was being solved by weak auras was like, all right, there's a whole bunch of soaks that need to be covered over the course of the fight, and it's not realistic to have that like 7 to 8 soaks up.
Yeah, look at what Neo said. I remember when you were pumping with your DH with that add-on, turned it off, and your damage went way down. Very true. But that's the ability of these add-ons that you have.
up simultaneously, where you need to also account for like, well, this person just got targeted by different mechanics, so they need a backup to go in and do it for them.
Yeah, so it sounds initially like it's, we're restricting what add-ons can do, but really we're opening up the universe of mechanics that can exist in a WoW boss without, because there are so many that you could think of right now where all of them would be, this is going to get solved by this, right? This is going to get solved by this, but if that's not the answer, then now the designers have all these tools back and we can get these mechanics that maybe haven't been used since MOP because we've been weak-oring them ever since, and now we get to solve them with our brains again.
And he even mentioned too, he said like, well, there's a lot of swirlies now.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, like, oh, we can always default to this and a few other things because you're not going to solve that with weaker, so we can add fights where that's not a thing. But you remove that, that friction of there's too many swirlies goes away. And I think there's assignment, like doing a lot of these assignment bosses without a weak aura that could work would be like really fun. Like it's fun to do that. It's fun when you have 5 people that need to soak something, like the last phase of Gallywix. There's a frontal on a side of a room and 2 people die. And right now weak aura is just like, okay, well then we're gonna assign backup. So these 2 people get a big green thing on their screen, go soak that. That is something where that fight is spread out enough where you could actually communicate that. We need 2 people on the right to back up because 2 soakers are dead. Who can do it? This person says something, this person says something. Now obviously you're not gonna have that kind of communication like heroic and normal. Maybe it won't be in comms, whatever, but in Mythic, that's perfectly reasonable, right? A lot of the things, like we could probably count honestly on 1, maybe 2 hands over the last like 4 or 5 years, how many bosses would you meaningfully would have to have a mechanic change, but they're very impactful, very memorable, and they have been purely defined by that. Are you worried at all about the communities, and this has certainly been ramping up over time, like you mentioned, even for us, we were much more just do the mechanic 4 or 5 years ago than we are now. Are you worried that there has been this built-in reliance on it that might be hard to shake when creating new raid bosses?
Absolutely. And I think that some of that gets back to us knowing that we need to really ease into this, that any world where we just kind of rip the Band-Aid off and say, all right, have fun, honestly, we're in a new world, as opposed to building up more built-in functionality, starting to have clearer visuals, simplify some mechanics, and then building counters and to have classes designed around a world where we know that this isn't possible. As long as people are set up for success, I think we'll be fine. Certainly, if we were to disable any functionality and then players went into a new tier and we're just wiping to bosses and they used to clear heroic comfortably and now they're brick walled halfway through heroic, yeah, players that will be a source of tremendous frustration. But we know that we need to avoid that by any means possible, and we have a lot of work to do before we get there.
Something that really encourages me is the ping system. That seems like such a perfect way to give us an option to identify where we're going, right? You can just ping where you're going, and then you don't have to, try and communicate with words. Hey, I'm going to move over to the left 20 yards, right? I just ping where I'm going, and that opens up an ability to solve these, again, in a YOLO style, right, rather than an assignment.
I think your guild did that.
Yeah.
So the Echo of Neltharion, right?
Yeah, we just pinged it.
Yeah, so famously, everyone had the maps for that. Here's your exact spot you go, and then his guild was like, you know what, everyone just ping your spot. Mostly it gets covered. People go to the same spot every pull. But if you see 2 pings in a spot, 1 person has to move, right? And that could largely solve a mechanic with just something that's already built into the game.
Yeah, I think and the ping system is something we've also talked about looking to improve and to kind of broaden the sorts of things you can do with it to give people more tools to solve these problems in a coordinated way, but using their own skill and expression instead of another tool.
When I think of World of Warcraft, I'm always thinking back to when I first started playing the game, and there was this really exciting moment where I looked at it and I'm like, oh my god, I can make this game look however I want, right? I can put this here, I can have an add-on that tells me what time it is in London, what time it is in Darnassus, right? I can have all the world clocks there if I want. I can have 3 different bars at the bottom of my screen. I can do whatever I want there, and to me that's always been a strength, not a weakness of WoW. So I think there's a lot of people that disagree with me on that. But then there's also people that they hear about Blizzard thinking about restricting add-ons and they're worried about losing that. Is there any intention to go after any of that kind of customization?
Not whatsoever. And in fact, we're doing everything we can and we would do everything we can down the line to minimize any collateral damage to them. But the goal is anything that's cosmetic should be completely fair game. All informational stuff that's out of combat, again, you have RP add-ons, things that are tracking, helping with professions, tracking gathering nodes, helping you with quests, you name it, a bunch of accessibility add-ons. All of those, there's nothing harmful whatsoever about any of them. The only thing is, at the very end of the day, once we feel like we've done enough on our end to improve baseline functionality, what we'd be looking at is the ability to parse real-time combat events in a way that drives, problem solving on the fly.
So it's kind of, we build the scaffolding to then be able to take away the existing weak aura solutions that we have for these. How much of this is, so the thing that's excited me also about edit mode has been, it's so clearly based on what the community has learned over 20 years, right? It's like, oh, the community has revolved around this as a solution for presenting this information. Let's give them that base in the UI rather than making them download something. How much of this initiative is still going to be based on what the community says, how the community reacts, versus which of these things are already kind of locked in decisions?
I'd say basically nothing here is locked in.
Okay.
Really, my hope today is to kind of begin a conversation about that direction and what areas are welcome, what areas maybe have more to do to convince the community on, and what areas we might be wrong on and should, reconsider. Because I think at the end of the day, this game belongs first and foremost to our millions of players. We're trying to serve them as best we can in the long run. And I think our sense is that for many players, the feeling that they have to download and use certain add-ons in order to play the game competitively isn't really part of what's attractive about the game or healthy in the long run. And so if we can pull things back to a place where add-ons are available for those who want to use them, but people aren't feeling pressured by their groups, by just the natural demands of competition and not wanting to lose out to someone who's using more advantages, then that's going to be the healthier route in the long run.
So if I was the kind of person who wanted to write a 10-paragraph forum manifesto, this would be one of the topics to do it on, right?
Absolutely. We'll be reading, we'll be listening. I think this is a long path ahead. And yeah, just, curious to kick off the conversation and hear how people feel about it. So Rotation Assist is coming in 11.1.7, which is going to be hitting the PTR in the very near future. Can't wait to hear people's feedback as they're able to hop on and check it out. We'll be listening closely so we can make it the best it can be for everybody. It's also been amazing to just get a chance to talk through kind of the history of add-ons in WoW, where they are today, and where they might be going in the future. Thank you guys for coming out. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us here. Really looking forward to see what the community has to say about how much they want more of these casts, maybe monthly, maybe bi-weekly, weekly, whatever you guys think, put it in the comments.
Daily.
Daily?
Yeah.
You said it, it's not me. Thank you so much, Liz. It's been really, really awesome.
All right. You heard it here, everybody. You heard it here. As one of those things that we all know can be a thing, by the way. Can be a thing. So World of Warcraft is going in a new direction where they want to try and wipe out weak auras at the end of their venture. So that is one of the things. Scrub uses GSE, and you see that's kind of one of the things that everybody doesn't like. I've watched other content creators out there that are talking about, like, I saw Zaryu, who's like, there's nothing that exists that is a one button press. Come on. You've been in this game for how long? You didn't know this fucking thing existed? I've only been here for like 5 years. You know what I'm saying? And your daughter, Amara Cat, is already enjoying having the one button press. She's like, Daddy, take me into fucking Mythics. Let's go. They want to bring it to console, so they're trying to change shit. I've heard that too. So this is one of those things where everyone's going to have to try and see, is this the game you still want to play? I will link this down in the description below, and we're gonna get into our next topic. If you want to know what it is, come to Twitch, Achilles_1970. Give us a listen and enjoy our live reaction, as a matter of fact.